There's a moment in the AI lab when silence fills the room, not because the system malfunctioned, but because it detected something in the INFJ participants that didn't fit any of its predictive models. The algorithm flagged a specific behavior as statistically abnormal, not because it was wrong, but because it was too rare, too precise, too deeply human for its calculations to categorize. And for the first time, the researchers weren't studying AI. They were studying INFJs. What the system couldn't understand was how one personality type could read emotional patterns faster than logic could compute, anticipate intentions before words appeared, and adjust their entire presence without revealing a single shift externally. The AI labeled it anomalous. Humans might call it intuition. But INFJs know it feels more like a sixth sense that has been sharpening quietly since childhood. This moment became the turning point, not for the researchers, but for the INFJs, who suddenly realized their deepest cognitive skill isn't a weakness, a quirk, or an overactive imagination. It's data the world can't measure, but consistently relies on. And if you've ever felt like you notice things no one else sees, this video will finally explain why. Before you continue, answer this in the comments. Has your intuition ever warned you before reality caught up? If you're still watching, drop a single word, abnormal, so I know the real intuitives made it to the end. And if you're new here, subscribe to Brainy One. The next chapter will reveal the second AI-flagged INFJ behavior. And trust me, missing it would be the real anomaly. The AI detected that INFJs process emotional information faster than logical data models can track. When researchers fed thousands of emotional scenarios into an advanced predictive AI, the system began flagging one specific pattern as an anomaly. INFJs were responding too fast. Not in a rushed or impulsive way, but with a level of immediate emotional comprehension the machine couldn't map. While the AI needed multiple data points to identify a feeling, INFJs needed almost nothing, just a shift in tone, a flicker in the eyes, a brief hesitation. It was as if their minds bypassed the usual analytical steps and jumped straight to an intuitive conclusion the machine couldn't compute. The algorithm logged the speed as abnormal, not because INFJs were incorrect, but because the system couldn't understand how a human could process emotional truth faster than its own weighted models. The more data the researchers fed in, the more confused the AI became. It expected emotional recognition to follow logical pathways, facial expressions, patterns of speech, behavioral indicators. But INFJs consistently detected the underlying emotion before the measurable signals appeared. They responded to fear before the face tightened, sensed anger before the voice changed, and recognized sadness while the smile was still convincing. To the AI, this created what the report called temporal distortions, moments where INFJs seemed to know the emotional state of someone earlier than the recorded data suggested. Machines interpret this as impossible. Humans interpret it as intuition. But for INFJs, it is simply how their internal world processes reality: quiet, immediate, unexplainable. The researchers expected the AI to eventually adjust its predictive model to account for this phenomenon, but the opposite happened. The system repeatedly flagged INFJ responses as statistical outliers: too fast, too accurate, too consistent. It labeled the pattern nonlinear emotional processing, a term used when the algorithm cannot map the steps between input and conclusion. INFJs weren't guessing. They weren't analyzing. They were knowing. And in a room full of data scientists and machines built to measure human behavior, it became clear that the INFJ mind operates on a frequency even advanced AI struggles to quantify. It flagged INFJ ability to notice micro-expressions as too accurate to fall within normal human ranges. During the experiment, participants were shown a sequence of facial expressions flashed so quickly the average observer couldn't register them consciously. The AI measured accuracy scores across all personality types, expecting a predictable distribution, some above average, some below, all within human limits. But INFJs broke the pattern. They identified fleeting emotional cues with precision levels the AI had only ever seen in trained interrogators, elite psychologists, or facial recognition specialists. The system didn't understand how a group with no formal training could read expressions that appeared for less than a fraction of a second. The AI flagged the data repeatedly, labeling the INFJ responses as statistically improbable, a category reserved for anomalies that defy its predictive logic. When the researchers dug deeper, they realized the INFJs weren't just identifying expressions, they were interpreting the emotion beneath them. A twitch of the mouth, a micro drop in the eyes, a barely perceptible tightening of the jaw, these were enough for the INFJ mind to construct a complete emotional context. The AI tracked the expressions frame by frame, yet the INFJs grasped their meaning faster than the algorithm could process them. The room grew quieter each time another INFJ results appeared on the screen, surpassing thresholds the system relied on to define normal human perception. To the machine, this wasn't just high accuracy. It was emotional pattern recognition so sensitive that the system labeled it as beyond standard human detection capability. By the end of the trial, the AI's reporting system had issued the same alert more than a dozen times: outlier activity detected. What unsettled the researchers most wasn't that INFJs scored high, it was how naturally, how effortlessly, how instinctively they did it. They weren't straining their eyes or concentrating intensely. They were simply absorbing what others missed. The AI concluded that INFJs perceive emotional truth the way some people perceive color, instantly, without effort, and with a depth no algorithm has yet learned to replicate. It identified that INFJs connect emotional fragments into complete patterns with unprecedented speed. When the AI tracked participants' responses, it expected linear processing, one emotional cue recognized, then another, then a conclusion formed after enough data points appeared. But INFJs didn't operate in a linear sequence. They made intuitive leaps the system couldn't map. Instead of waiting for patterns to fully form, they assembled meaning from fragments, an unfinished sentence, a shift in breathing, a glance that lingered too long. The AI watched them draw accurate conclusions from inputs so incomplete that, by its own standards, no logical deduction should have been possible. It flagged the results as non-sequential cognition, meaning the INFJs weren't following computational steps. They were jumping to truth at a speed the system couldn't calculate. As the experiment continued, something stranger emerged. Whenever the emotional data became chaotic or contradictory, where most people hesitated, misread, or defaulted to assumptions, NFJs became sharper. The AI's neural tracking showed their cognitive activity spike only for a moment and then stabilize, as if the confusion helped them lock onto the correct pattern. The machine struggled to replicate their process, feeding itself the same fragments and attempting thousands of permutations, none of which produced the same intuitive accuracy. It labeled the INFJ processing style as pattern reconstruction beyond model prediction, a rare category used when the AI cannot trace how a conclusion was reached. Humans were supposed to think slower than the machine. Yet here, the INFJs were several steps ahead, completing emotional puzzles before the algorithm had finished sorting the pieces. By the end of the study, the researchers realized the INFJs weren't analyzing isolated details, they were translating emotional ecosystems. Every fragment, every micro cue, every shift in energy became part of a mosaic the AI couldn't assemble in time. What the system saw as disconnected noise, INFJs experienced as a coherent story unfolding in real time. And when the final report generated, the AI classified this ability as statistically abnormal intuitive integration, a form of pattern recognition so rapid, so holistic, and so deeply human that even advanced neural networks couldn't imitate it. It labeled INFJ's ability to sense tension shifts before they visibly occur as statistically irregular. During the experiment, the AI monitored participants through biometric sensors, facial tracking, and environmental audio analysis. It expected tension detection to occur only after observable cues: raised voices, tightened posture, changes in expression. But INFJs responded seconds, sometimes minutes, before any of those signals appeared. They shifted their breathing, repositioned themselves, or redirected their attention as if reacting to an event that had not yet happened. The AI flagged the timestamps repeatedly, assuming a synchronization error. When the data proved accurate, it labeled the phenomenon pre-reactive emotional awareness, because INFJs seem to sense tension forming beneath the surface long before it broke into conscious behavior. As the researchers replayed the footage, the pattern became undeniable. A participant's jaw would clench half a second after the INFJ had already looked toward them. Someone's irritation would spike on a biometric graph, and the INFJ had already adjusted their posture to defuse or disengage. The AI couldn't track the source of their anticipatory responses because there were no measurable cues preceding them. No raised heart rate from the other person. No micro-expression. No shift in voice. Nothing the machine considered evidence. The NFJs were perceiving atmospheric changes, subtle fluctuations in emotional pressure that had not yet manifested physically. To the system, this appeared impossible. It labeled the behavior non-correlative prediction, meaning the INFJs reacted without any identifiable cause. The final evaluation confused the research team even more. When grouped together, the INFJ's anticipatory accuracy formed a curve far outside normal human deviation. They weren't guessing. They weren't projecting. They were sensing something the AI couldn't measure: intention before action, tension before reaction, emotional weather before the storm. In the final output, the system flagged the trend as statistically irregular emotional foresight, a cognitive phenomenon where INFJs detect conflict in its pre-birth phase, when it still lives as energy, not behavior. And for the machine trained to quantify reality, this ability didn't fit anywhere in its models. It simply exceeded them. It struggled to explain how INFJs see through deception, even when actors were trained to mislead. The AI was designed to detect deception by analyzing facial micro-movements, vocal irregularities, and physiological shifts. The actors in the experiment were professionally trained to mask all of these. They maintained steady breathing, controlled eye contact, neutral expressions, and consistent vocal tone. On paper, they were perfect liars. Yet INFJs called out the deception, or quietly withdrew from it, before any measurable cue appeared. The AI flagged this repeatedly as an incongruent outcome because the INFJs were identifying dishonesty without relying on any of the standard markers the machine used. To the algorithm, it looked as if INFJs were accessing information outside the data stream itself. As the experiment unfolded, the researchers attempted more sophisticated misdirection. They had actors layer emotions, hide motives behind friendly behavior, or intentionally misalign verbal tone with body language. Still, INFJs pierced through the performance. They would tilt their heads slightly, narrow their eyes, or become gently silent, their intuitive system already registering a mismatch the AI couldn't detect. When cross-referenced with biometric logs, the machine still found no deception markers at the moments the INFJs reacted. The AI flagged this as non-detectable perceptual accuracy, meaning the INFJs were sensing deception before the actors exhibited any physical trace of it. The machine couldn't explain how a human could respond to signals it could not measure, especially when trained deception experts produced none. By the end of the study, the AI classified the INFJ responses as statistically anomalous pattern recognition. The INFJs weren't reading faces, they were reading intention. They weren't observing slips, they were absorbing emotional dissonance that existed beneath the mask. The actors themselves reported feeling seen through, even though they executed their roles flawlessly. The machine's final report described INFJs as operating with a sub-intentional detection ability, a mode of perception that bypasses behavior entirely and locks onto the emotional truth behind it. And for a system designed to decode humans through metrics, it was the one variable it had no formula to compute. It recorded INFJ, intuition predicting emotional outcomes with accuracy exceeding machine expectations. During the experiment, the AI tracked every participant's physiological markers, heart rate variability, microexpressions, vocal tremors, attention shifts. It built predictive models based on thousands of data points per second. Yet the INFJs kept doing something the machine wasn't built to anticipate. They were predicting emotional outcomes before any measurable sign appeared. While the AI waited for quantifiable indicators, INFJs were already pointing to where the conversation was heading, how a conflict would unfold, or which participant would emotionally withdraw next. In the logs, the system repeatedly marked their predictions as premature, because at the moment the INFJ made them, none of the usual precursors existed. Only minutes later, the emotional arc unfolded exactly as the INFJ had quietly sensed. As the study progressed, researchers added layers of complexity, shifts in tone, altered emotional storylines, conflicting instructions for participants to test whether the INFJs had simply memorized patterns. But even in unpredictable, chaotic conditions, INFJs kept forecasting outcomes with uncanny accuracy. The AI searched for correlating variables, breathing irregularity, blinking patterns, tension shifts in the jaw or shoulders. It found nothing. On several occasions, emotional reactions occurred suddenly in participants, yet the INFJ had already prepared for them, adjusting their demeanor moments before the change happened. The machine flagged these sequences as anticipatory behavior unsupported by sensor data. In other words, INFJs were reading emotional futures the AI didn't yet know existed. By the end of the experiment, the machine's predictive model could no longer classify INFJ intuition as standard human perception. It labeled the phenomenon nonlinear emotional forecasting, a kind of intuitive processing that leaps past data and grasps the trajectory beneath it. What unsettled the researchers most wasn't just the accuracy, but the calm with which INFJs delivered their insights. There was no hesitation, no guesswork, no visible cognitive strain. They simply knew. For the AI, programmed to detect logic in everything, INFJ intuition became the one variable that defied the boundaries of measurable human behavior, a quiet intelligence that predicted emotional truth faster than any machine could compute. It found that INFJs stay calm under pressure while still processing complex emotional environments internally. The AI had been trained to detect stress microtremors in the voice, subtle tension around the eyes, fluctuations in breathing, even the smallest disruptions in cognitive rhythm. In high-pressure scenarios, every participant showed predictable spikes. Their speech quickened, their gestures sharpened, their bodies betrayed the rising emotional noise. Every participant except the INFJs. While the emotional landscape around them grew chaotic, the machine registered a near flat line of external stress indicators. No rapid blinking. No tightened jaw. No erratic pulse. Outwardly, they were serene. But internally, something extraordinary was happening. An intense, silent processing of emotional variables that the AI could only capture indirectly. When the researchers reviewed the internal cognitive markers, micro delays in reaction, shifts in eye focus, pattern recognition speed, they discovered that the INFJs were not shutting down under pressure. They were accelerating. Their internal modeling of emotional dynamics sharpened, not fractured. While others grew overwhelmed, INFJs were mapping connections. Who was acting from fear? Who was hiding anger? Who was about to withdraw? Who might explode? Their calm wasn't emptiness, it was strategy. The AI flagged this dual state as paradoxical emotional regulation, a condition where the nervous system remains steady while the mind analyzes increasingly complex emotional data in real time. Machines didn't behave this way. Most humans didn't either. The moment that stunned the research team came during a simulated conflict. Multiple participants began reacting unpredictably, voices rising, tensions spiking. The AI struggled to prioritize emotional signals, its models fragmented. Meanwhile, the INFJ remained fully composed, tracking every shift like a conductor, listening through noise for the next movement. When the conflict peaked, the INFJ intervened with uncanny timing. One sentence that diffused tension faster than any measured protocol. Afterward, the AI logs showed something unprecedented. The INFJ external stress markers remained stable throughout the chaos, yet their internal emotional processing markers had operated at maximum capacity. For the machine, this shouldn't have been possible. For the INFJ, it was simply how they moved through the world. Quiet on the outside, storm-level intelligence within. There's a reason the AI flagged INFJs as statistically abnormal, and it has nothing to do with weakness. If anything, it exposed a truth most people overlook. While the world reacts loudly, the INFJ evolves quietly. They don't need to dominate a room to understand it. They don't need to raise their voice to shift its energy. And they don't need permission to see what others refuse to acknowledge. Their calm is not passive. Their intuition is not mystical. It is a precise, deeply trained form of emotional intelligence that even advanced algorithms struggle to quantify. The world may underestimate them, but data doesn't lie. So if you've ever felt like you process life differently, deeper, faster, this might be why. The machine saw it, the researcher saw it, and maybe now you see it too. Before you go, I want to hear from you. What's one word that describes how you experience your intuition? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading every one. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe and watch the next video. You'll understand a part of your mind you've never had words for until now.